How we doing? Well, on Star Wars Battlefront 2. And just like Star Wars Battlefront 2, this game was not perfect on release. Let me tell you that. I was there. I was there. Trust me, trust me. I actually was here for the first game. You know, huge Battlefield inspired game if you don't know already. But, at first, when this game came out, I was like, it's a solid game, very raw, very. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Well, because of my parents, but, you know. Ooh. But, yeah. The first game was great, a little bare bones, and then when the second game came out, everyone was excited, right? Until you played it. You played it, and you were like, what is this? What is this pay-to-win nonsense? This game, you had to pay like I don't even know, like over $100 just to unlock Darth Vader, and for a while, they stuck with that, and people stopped playing the game. People fell out of love. People moved on, and EA realized, the developers of this game realized they had to change. They invested so much time, so much money into their project, and it flopped. But they weren't gonna give up on it now. They needed to change. And how did they do that? Got rid of all the microtransaction BS. They fixed, the gunplay. They fixed, the point system. They made it easier to unlock characters. All our characters are free. And dare I say, people now enjoy this game. This is now one of the top FPS shooters, I would say. Well, it was. And now, people are glad to go back. People are happy to play this game. They're glad the game changed, because what it was beforehand just wasn't good enough. And they knew that. And so, dear viewer, I want to tell you this. You need to change. If you're not happy where you are, well, let's back up for a second. If you're watching this video, you're most likely, Gen Z age, teenager to early adult, phase. Or you might be a little older, a little younger, I don't care. If you're watching this, then obviously you might not be too content with your life. So you might have already made the realization that you need to change. If you haven't, you have it, but you need to make that change. You need to make that realization. And you might be telling me, Dia, I want to change, but I mean, how do I even? Like, I'm so used to doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or what I've been doing. Like, how do I even change? Whoa, let me tell you this. You gotta want it. And not just want it, you gotta crave it. You gotta almost be obsessed with changing in order to change. Because change just doesn't come when you finally make that first thought of, alright, screw it, I'm going. Let's change. It comes after you've been sitting there thinking about changing and getting mad at yourself for changing for so long, until you finally sit up from your butt and decide, alright, I'm doing this. I'm tired of sitting in my pain. Now, I changed, and I'm still changing. But a recent change that I've developed is my social skills, If you paid attention to my past videos, I brought up a little bit of the fact that I was a bit antisocial growing up, and scared to talk to women, or scared to talk to people in general, honestly. If I don't, but you don't harp on me too hard, I can admit it, and it's fine to admit stuff. But for a long time, I always wondered, like, why am I so lonely? Or, why don't I enjoy talking to people? I made that oh shoot, I made that question, right? Of, why am I even like this? And I realized that I was scared. Not scared of me messing up. I guess there was a part of that, but it was more like scared of what the other person was gonna say or think about me, right? So, I would just resort to what I always knew, which was, don't speak too much, be quiet. No one really cares what you think, type thing. That's what I was thought when I was growing up. That my opinion didn't really matter, and I, sorry, I decided, that must be the truth. That must be the truth that, my opinion doesn't matter, and it's whatever. And other people will make that realization. They'll think, oh, this person doesn't take himself seriously, so we don't gotta take himself seriously. And that's a trap. That's a trap that people put themselves in. So basically what I'm saying is, you will not change, and you will believe your own lies for as long as there isn't no evidence against it, I stuck with this philosophy, this mindset for, I'd say, over 90% of my life so far, and until recently, in the last year or two, I was I was done, I'd always been a sheltered kid, and I was tired of being sheltered, I said, you know what, I'm just gonna start putting myself out there, like what's the worst that could happen, basically, which my head, and the realization that I made was I might get hurt, or my feelings would get hurt, but I guess I was over that in a way, my feelings were hurt without even doing anything, I was hurting myself while not even experiencing the thing that was hurting me, I was putting the pain on me before it even happened to try to prepare myself. But what you don't realize is the situation never goes how you think it is, and we may believe that, oh, we know this is gonna happen. We know if we do X, that X will happen, or if I react this way, then they'll react that way. But you might think you've followed every step right, and it still will not go your way. That's because we live in a life where basically we live in a place where anything could happen at any moment. So the only thing you can control is yourself. And that realization changed a lot about how I live my life, I started to realize that I had all this stress on me, all this worries on me that weren't even mine, I had other people's opinions of what they wanted me to be, and I thought, they've been alive for a lot longer, so they must know what I want to do more, which is very stupid. Very stupid. Nobody knows what you like. Nobody knows you more than yourself. Okay? Not your parents, not your friends, not your girlfriend, not your wife. If you got a wife, let me tell you this. You're one lucky man. I made that realization, and I was set on changing. I was there. I was done. So, Dia, you may be saying, Dia, what'd you do? How'd you start doing that change? Oh, Darth Maul. How'd you start making that change? Well, I changed my environment. I got a new job, and I started working at Sam's Club, giving out the little samples. If you've seen the older people, at Sam's, Costco, you know what I'm talking about. You go to the Sam's Club, you get your little slice of pizza, you walk out, you spin back again, you say, oh, I'm a new person, You put on a hat, you put on some shades, and you get another. Well, let me tell you this, we don't care. They people don't care. You can just pull up, bro. I'll give you like an extra slice or not. It's up to me, If you're cool, you're cool. But anyways, I started working at the sample place, and it forced me to socialize, At first, I thought, okay, it's an easy job. Like, I'll just pass out the samples, just get about my day. But if you haven't done this job, I'll tell you, it's the easiest job in the world, but it's the most boring job in the world. You sit at a cart all day handing out samples, and some people like them, some people don't. It's whatever. But the day would go by so long, just me standing there, just being like, oh, here you go, have a nice day. And my boss would harp about the fact that, oh, you're supposed to do this selling technique, or like you're supposed to present the product. They tell me to do my job basically. But I was just like, let me try it. Let me see how it goes. Who knows? What's the worst that could happen, right? And I start, talking to the customers. Start talking about the product, and I realized that most of my conversations turned into me asking them about something that they had that was going on, or what they were doing, just asking. And I realized that I enjoyed asking people, just asking people questions, really, like I see a guy with a Dragon Ball shirt, and I'd be like, yo, that's sick Dragon Ball shirt, man, where'd you get it? And he'd be like, oh man, my grandma got this for me, man, I just put it on. I don't really know, but I appreciate you. And I'd be like, alright, bro, that's a real sick shirt, though. I appreciate you, and slowly, I started to worry less and less about what they thought about me. Or that fear slowly backed off. That fear took the back seat. It was still there, I won't lie. Some moments he'd be like an older gentleman and looks a little rough on the outside, and you'd be like, oh, I don't know if I should say anything to him. But then, you'll be like, you say a little joke, and who knows, they laugh. That's what I realized. Most people, they give this cold front. They give this this cold shoulder because it's better to be safe than sorry. You're not trying to interact, and you're just trying to get your business done without interrupting. But I feel like most people are more sociable than you think. Most people are, they're looking for a reason to talk. I realized, people have an opinion, and if they get to share it, the heads light up, the eyes light up, and they're just like, oh my god, like finally, I'm being heard. And like, I realize when I get that opportunity, it makes me feel great. So if I can give that opportunity to somebody else, like maybe they'd appreciate it. And look, I'd be at work just talking and not even talking about the job, and I'd be selling product. Obviously, I didn't make any commission, but it was more about the fact just to keep me busy, And be selling product, and it turned to a part where it bled into my real life. I started, I'd be at class, and it's actually how I met my girlfriend. But yeah, that's how I met my girlfriend. I'd sit next to her, and I'd ask her questions. Like, what's that phone case mean, or where'd you get that shirt? I just, small questions showed genuine interest, and she reciprocated. She would say, she asked me questions back, or she'd give me detailed answers, and I guess that's how I knew that what I was doing was working. And so I sat with it. I just kept that mindset of, I could talk to anybody, I guess, if I really want to. If there's something to talk about, I guess I can make a conversation about it. It might be fun, who knows? And yeah, I somehow changed enough to enjoy conversating, to see my value in a conversation, and see how other people add value to a conversation also. Oh, but yeah, I changed. I changed for my good, and I really enjoyed it. And I never thought I would change. For a long time, I was very negative. I believed that who I am as a person is forever I'll be, that's who I'll be for the rest of my life. And that doesn't have to be true, it's only true if you make it true. So if you're somebody going through something that makes you want to change, crave it, and keep going after it. Don't give up on that feeling, because that feeling will never leave you until you actually do it. The feeling to change and start this YouTube channel was forever. Oh, you trying to shoot me, bro? Was forever with me. You know, I always had this feeling I needed to do this YouTube channel. It took me forever, but just, you know, finally started working on it. You know, finally started talking to people, and I feel a lot better. You know, I feel like a lot less stressed about my future in a way. You know, gives me a sense of like almost everything's gonna be okay. Because, well, I'm doing what I want to do in the way I want to do it. So as long as you're doing that, that's all that really matters. So, seek change. Seek change as so yeah, seek change. As change is only the boat to take you to the final island of your destination. And once you're finally at that island and you look back at the boat sailing away, you'll be glad you rode that boat. You'll be glad that you made that decision. As you're finally becoming the person you want to be. Alright. D, see you out. D will see you out. Get out of here.